what would you say are some things that are coming up time and time again that you think a lot of businesses in the health and wellness sector are overlooking? Like, are there some terms or something that just get brushed over if they don't have someone like you on their side?
I think that the biggest thing that's changed in the past 2 years, and this is part of why I made the online course that we're going to share with the community, is that the way that the services have been provided have changed significantly in the past 2 years. So it used to be you operated your business in a particular way, and before the pandemic, you maybe you had agreements around that. But what's happened since then is the way that you offer your services have changed. The methods that you're using have changed. You're doing things pre-recorded or online or sometimes in person or possibly outdoors. And you have to make sure that your legal documents catch up to that. Also, on a service basis, we see a lot more consumer fear about engaging in in-person physical activities. And so we see more cancellations and refund requests. So how are documents drafted? So before you start working with someone, you can have something that's in your best interest and the relationship that you want. So hypothetically, let's say you get shut down or there's some issue that someone in the community has contracted COVID and you go to offering all of the services online. Now, people at law would be able to ask for a refund if the service agreement doesn't explicitly state that the services can be offered online as well. So that's like, these are sort of the questions that I see clients coming with, where they're like, well, what happens if we have to pivot? And what happens if we have to change? And what about this? Or like, what if my staff member issues with my staff members? So I think the most common thing that I just see is uncertainty around the changing landscape. And I think a byproduct of that, and this frustrates me the most, is that people are afraid to grow their business. Subconsciously, something will seep in their mind where they're like, well, I really, really, really want to grow and bring on as many random people that I can, but I don't have the confidence to, so how can I get there?
Gotcha. And kind of more of a specific example, I was doing some research on your guys' website and socials, and I saw you had a post about, something as simple as like the music that you're playing in class, and you could be exposing yourself to risk if you're, I'll let you explain it more, but if you're playing commercial music, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And like, it's the issue, and I've been through this a lot of times, where what happens is someone will, especially with the proliferation of streaming, Instagram Live, Facebook Live classes, even on Zoom classes, you use your own Spotify for the music. But what people don't know is that the type of license they have with Spotify or with Apple Music is a personal use license and not a commercial use license. So it's happened where I get emails or phone calls from frantic clients being like, oh my God, I got this email from this music licensing company. I'm going to get sued and they're coming after me and blah, blah, blah. What do I do around it? And I think that's an example where, as a fitness professional, you don't think of these legal issues, but it's something that we deal with probably that comes up on a bi-weekly basis, not on a daily basis. But yeah, it's a real issue. And again, what I observe, because for me as a lawyer, I know that everything's always going to be okay. That's always my mindset. Like, cool, whatever it is, we'll work through it. I've never had an issue that's been unresolved in 5 years of doing this, so it's going to be fine. But you just see clients freaking out and getting really scared and really nervous about what can happen. And so, there are something as simple as the music that you play in class. What licensing agreement have you agreed to in order to use that? And then part of what we do is we give clients options of different license-free music that you can use without issue, or you can speak to certain licensing agents to pay a lot more money, but then be able to play whatever music you want.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, and it's stuff like that. Like, it seems so simple at face value, but it's actually, there are consequences if you just kind of do that and say the wrong person is in the class and hears that and doesn't like it.
Yeah, that's how that specific issue arises. That there will be someone who participates in the class and realizes what's going on or catches it on Facebook. And like, look, that's also someone's job to look for that, however strange that might seem. But it's an example of, when you're an entrepreneur and you're starting a fitness or health or wellness business, they don't give you a handbook to be like, these are all the legal issues you need to be aware of. So part of what I try to do is, yeah, not everyone has to work with us, and that's awesome. And people should find relationships that they love and feel great about. But at least I want to bring attention to the issues that people aren't blindsided by them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think liabilities and waivers are probably one that you get a lot of conversation on as well. Like, what would you say are some do's and don'ts on liabilities and waivers that might not be as obvious to someone who's building one for the first time?
The first thing that I would say is that the waiver has to be specific to you and your business. And sort of what I was mentioning before about how the way we offer our services have changed. You want to make sure that the waiver is specific to the types of activities that you're doing, where you're doing them, what equipment you're using, whether it's supervised or unsupervised, and then obviously having everything COVID related as well. And so the biggest mistakes that I'll see, and I had a conversation with a client this morning, and what she told me was she got a waiver from her cousin in 2007. And this is like a big business. They do a lot of activities with a lot, like they've got a client database that's huge. And just like, yeah, never really thought about it before, but like, oh, yeah, we're using it since 2007. And it came from my cousin whose friend is a lawyer. And I'm like, well, I'm already used to it, so I don't react anymore. But I'm like, cool, let's set you up with a new waiver. But the thing that person has to realize is if someone suffers an injury or damage based on activities that you're offering, and they really want to come after you, they're going to hire a good lawyer, and that lawyer is going to tear that waiver apart.
Yeah. And
so what I would say is make sure that it's professionally drawn, that it's industry specific, and that it covers you and your business. Because it's sort of like using a seatbelt that doesn't work, right? You could put the seatbelt on and be like, oh, well, I'm using a seatbelt. But if in reality, when you need that seatbelt, it's not going to save you, then it's the same of not having one at all.
Yeah, let alone all the technological, social, economic, all the changes happened since 2007 alone. I know I don't know how common this kind of example is for you, but yeah, just being up to date definitely sounds like something that you should be working on.
It is more common than you would think, but it's also what I think that people just don't have this mindset of being aware of these legal issues.
Yeah,
and that's part of, for me, what's so fulfilling about my work. Again, like, you know, I make an online course and I share it with as many people as I can. It's like, cool, just go through it and learn about these things that you should know. And that goes to like the mission of what we're trying to do. We're trying to transform the way legal services are provided, and you know, be a voice and be a source of information so that people become aware. And then I sleep better at night, and I feel better about the personal impact I'm making on the fitness industry, because all of our clients run a gym or have, you know, are providing some form of health services to their community. And if they're better protected, then they're going to help make the world a healthier place. And that's sort of the paid forward aspect.
Excellent. All right. And talk to us a little bit about how COVID impacted the legal side of operations for these operators that you work with. Like, do you encounter a lot of landlord issues, these kind of things, or what's been your experience with that on the legal side?
I'll definitely touch on lease and landlord issues, but the big answer, it would just be, firstly, waivers of liability that have to cover COVID, waivers of liability that cover all of the different modalities. Like, here's the thing that you probably don't know, or but I'm happy to share. A lot of insurance companies will cover Zoom classes, but they will not cover pre-recorded materials. So if you've made a database of videos and you're leading fitness classes in it, and you post that up, firstly, the activities and the risks are different, because now instead of A, things being done in person, or B, things being done on Zoom, there's no supervision. There's no one to make sure the safest space. And someone could be doing something completely, totally wrong. And even in the video, maybe you give a bit of instruction that's incorrect or erroneous. Person follows that. The waiver doesn't cover pre-recorded. Insurance doesn't cover pre-recorded. And like, that's the end of the game. In a Murphy's Law type of scenario. So, so the big things, and I will come back to leases in a moment, but it's like making sure the waiver covers modalities and, you know, transmission of communicable diseases, and then also just the service agreements and updating it to reflect the way that you feel comfortable running your business. That's really important. And then around landlords and leases, like, I probably in the first year of the pandemic, a lot of my work was working with clients to try to help them get out of leases or get out of payments.
Yeah.
Leases typically are the agreement that will be least favorable to the tenant of all the agreements that we see, just because usually it's a big corporation that's putting a 70-page agreement in front of a fitness professional who doesn't know how to read it or know what a standard, what should be fair legally is. And it's sort of like you get backed into a corner where, there will be provisions in a lease that says, okay, even if we don't accept the full money from you up front, we always are allowed to collect the full money that we should have been owed under the lease. And that happened to me twice last week, where I'm advising clients on how do we navigate this? We owe $110,000 to our landlord, and we want to renew the lease, and business is starting to finally pick back up again. What do we do? And it's really, really challenging. And so I'll just take 15 seconds to say to anyone, if you're about to sign a lease, or you're in the midst of renegotiating a lease for an extension or whatever it is, think about things like mandatory closure, think about things like limited capacity. And if you're working with someone who's helping you on the lease, just like write on a piece of paper, like worst case scenarios, all the things that could happen. We're shut for 3 months. We're only allowed 30% of our clients. And things that I do for my clients is we put in provisions that are like, okay, if the government is only allowing us to have a proportional amount of capacity, we only have to pay that amount for rent. Or if the government is forcing us to close and we cannot operate, the payment of rent for that month would be zero. And starting to have those conversations and bring those issues to light.
Wow. Okay. And see, I mean, things like that, or say the example with modality and the Zoom classes, as you mentioned, right? Like these are things that I think online fitness, it seems innocent enough, especially as COVID hit and all kinds of new content started coming online, but people may not be realizing that they're exposing themselves to risk. So I think it's really valuable insight that you're sharing right there.
Yeah. And also what I'd say to everyone is check your insurance policy and what you're covered with. And especially as this is lunch and learn, I hope you're building a dessert into this lunch, whatever's happening. Mine would involve almond butter, but come up with this, that what I always tell my clients is like, make your favorite snack or get a, hot cup of coffee, call your insurance provider. Before you call them, make a list of everything you're doing and how you're doing it and where you're doing it, and make sure that you're covered for all of it, because it was so sneaky that pre-recorded materials weren't covered that you'd never, like of the 30,000 thoughts I have on a daily basis, one of them is not, does my insurance cover me for pre-recorded materials as opposed to online classes? But it's really important. And that's what this conversation is about, is to getting to best practices.
Yeah. Wow. And so talking about maybe some more of like your golden tips or your best practices that you want to make sure that a lot of your clients or just anyone listening to this can come away with. Do you have a typical like top 3 that you like to share? I think we've probably already touched on 1 or 2 of them, but.
Yeah, I think the other things that I would think about is if you have a business and if you have a team, the importance of revisiting that relationship and just understanding, at least in North America and in Australia and New Zealand as well, just the difference between an independent contractor and an employee, and understanding what you can or can't do. Because the typical things that we'll see studios do or small businesses do is just, I'll call everyone a contractor because, it's simpler and easier and I don't have to, make mandatory governmental taxes or payments for that. But there are very, very serious repercussions that can both happen, from a tax perspective, if you're found to have misclassified, but also just like managing relationships with the teams. And I've seen a couple of business owners sort of raked over the coals by someone who was working with them, who was called a contractor, but treated like an employee. And again, the situation we want to avoid is that we're out of control of the situation. That's what I try to do with all my clients. And then probably another tip that I would just mention is the importance of turning your mind to a trademark. And thinking about how you can protect your intellectual property. If you're teaching a method, if you're trying to grow your business in a particular way, understanding the basics of intellectual property and how you can protect your brand, because your brand is a major asset. Goodwill is a major asset in your business if you down the road want to sell it. So what are the steps you can take today to protect yourself in the future?